question for you, Barry. Can you actually fly? Right? Like, he's got wings, he's had them for a while, but we've never actually seen him, like, take flight, so I'm just curious. Well, one way to find out, I suppose. Oh, okay, no, 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 no. I can think of a few good reasons why that is a horrible idea. But who knows? Maybe someday we'll see Barry take flight into the sky, beyond the reaches of Earth, out into the great expanse of the final frontier, and explore distant galaxies undiscovered by mortal man. Alright, so today's going to be a weird video. We're still talking about One Piece, except we're not exactly talking about anything in the story, except we're not. It's a little bit of an abstract concept, but I'm really excited to talk about it. I got a bunch of books and stuff for reference, so I'm really excited, okay? So, I guess I'll begin with how this idea began. So, a couple weeks ago, we had episode 968, right, which was a huge episode. It was the He Laughed episode, where Odin was writing in his logbook at the end of the episode about, Roger and the Roger Pirates arriving at Laugh-Tale, actually naming it Laugh-Tale, and their reaction to finding the One Piece. Okay, now for us manga readers, if you're a manga reader, this has been something that we knew was coming, but really hit completely differently with the anime, because the anime, of course, the animation was on point, just like out through the entirety of the Odin flashback. It's been really good, and also we dusted off one of the old classics. We dusted off Memories, which was the original ending theme to One Piece. That's something maybe a lot of people would notice, but it's just something that hasn't been a thing for so long, you just assume that's the way it always has been. One Piece has not had an ending theme since, like, Enies Lobby. I think the last one we had was the one with Robin all the way back during Enies Lobby, and so, One Piece is one of those anime, it just doesn't have an ending theme, okay? Which is maybe to cut that out, to have more stuff in the episode, but there's a lot of times where the anime has to, like, stretch things out anyway, so I feel like an ending theme would actually fit rather well in the story, considering we're only going, like, one chapter for every episode now, or sometimes less anyway, so you could bring back the ending themes. I don't think anybody would really be upset about that. But yeah, Memories was the first, and it's a beautiful song. It's one of my favorites in the entire One Piece catalog, and I've used it in, like, reviews before. I remember when Totland ended, I played Memories, like an instrumental version of Memories at the end of that review, and that was really fun. It's just a very emotional song. If you read the lyrics of that song, it just gets you, like, it's like, this is a grand adventure we're all going on, we set out to sea and everything. Very standard One Piece, but it works. So they dusted off that song, Memories, as Odin is writing in his logbook, and he's just like, Roger, upon gazing upon that amazing treasure, just laughed. So did we. We laughed until we cried. And that got me pretty emotional. I didn't cry or anything, but that got me emotional because this is the point of the story, right? Like, the story is named after the treasure we're all looking for, which we've been going on for over 23 years now, which, keep that in mind. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching this scene, and I've watched it many, many, many times, and I'm like, man, when we finally find out what the One Piece is, and it might be in the manga version of it or in the anime version when it finally gets to that point, but, like, I want to have the same reaction that Roger and his crew had to the One Piece. And that's like a tall order for Oda, obviously, as a writer. But when we finally do find out what the One Piece is, I want to laugh so hard that I cry. I want to have that same reaction, right? And I have no idea if, that's going to happen, and I don't want to, like, force it or anything, like, ha 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 ha, and then just keep doing that. No, I want to have a genuine, like, we find out what the One Piece is, I click on the page when the One Piece shows up, and I'm like, okay, alright, I get it now, like, that's the reaction I want to have, alright, so that's one thing I thought of when I'm watching that scene, because this is like, all right, the reaction to seeing the treasure that we've been waiting over 2 decades to finally get to, and we're going to have to wait a few more years until we finally get to that point with the Straw Hats. But the other thing I thought of was like, man, One Piece is truly like one of those epic stories of our time. Right? Now, you, of course, if you don't like One Piece, you don't like One Piece. I'm just simply saying that this is a manga that is the best-selling manga in the entire world, and it's been going on for, like I said, over 2 decades now, and it's a consistent story, because I know there's a lot of, like, Western comic books that have been around for way, way longer than One Piece, you know, like Batman and, you know, Superman and everything, but they're not, like, one consistent continuity, like, they're different universes, different stories and everything like that, different versions of, like, Superman or Batman or the Green Lanterns or whatever, but with One Piece, it's like, no, it's one consistent story, one main character, you know, Monkey D. Luffy, traveling on this adventure with a bunch of his friends and going to different islands and discovering crazy new people and different things and everything like that, all seeking this final end goal of the One Piece, and it's just taken us, it's going to take us probably closer to like 25 plus years to finally get to that point, right? And so that got me thinking about all these other great books that have been written throughout history, and then I started thinking, what is One Piece's place in history going to be? You know, like, how is this, like, going to go, like, in the future, like, in the far-flung future, like, hundreds of years from now, you know, after everybody here is, you know, passed on, and it's just, like, the next version of, like, okay, now it's, like, this Earth looking back at, like, a century ago, when it was, like, oh, yes, in the century of the beginning of the 21st century, yes, there was this manga called One Piece that was really popular, and it was, like, an epic story about pirates with superpowers. Like, I'm curious, like, is it going to be taught in, like, schools or whatever, you know, and then even further than that down the line, because I have some examples here, and when I want to keep in mind, like, when I say this, I'm not, like, comparing One Piece to, like, everything here in, like, perfect respect, like, you know, One Piece is, like, the modern equivalent of the Iliad by Homer, or it's like a William Shakespeare piece, or it's like Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy. I'm not saying it's, like, the exact same thing, obviously, I'm just saying, like, these are, you know, works of fiction that give us windows into the past of our planet. You know, William Shakespeare lived in the 1600s, or the 16th century, 1500s, somewhere around there William Shakespeare lived. I know the Iliad was written in the 8th century BC, so around like 760 BC or something, the Iliad was written. And then we have Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, which was written at the beginning of the 14th century, at like around the beginning of the 1300s. He started it, and I think around 1320, right before Dante died, he finished it. But there are windows into the past. You know, we can look at, like, these are the grand stories that were told during their time periods, right? And some were based on, like, historical events, you know, for example, like the Trojan War. And then others were, like, Macbeth, you know, and, like, A Midsummer's Night Dream, another one of my favorite ones from Shakespeare, you know, and that stuff was, like, more comedies and stuff. And then Dante Alighieri's was, I love this because it's pretty much like, Dante was a man that respected geography because he mapped hell out, all right? He's like, I'm gonna take hell and purgatory and heaven, and I'm gonna map it out with geography. And I'm like, yes, Dante! Yes, you do that! Okay. So, you know, these places, these are just few examples. These are just some examples I had on my bookshelf. I do have the Odyssey as well, but my bookshelf is in, like, disarray right now, so I couldn't dig through all of that. There's modern examples you could look at. Actually, one thing I do have on hand right here are the Lord of the Rings books by Tolkien. I have those. So obviously, a lot of books that have a place in history, okay? And so, have you guys heard about the, probably what you've heard of more than this other thing is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. I've probably butchered the name of that island, of that archipelago, but it's an archipelago that's located north of the Nordic countries. It's very close to the North Pole. It's under the jurisdiction of Norway, and it's like, you know, a frozen archipelago, very far removed from everywhere on the planet, pretty much. And there's a seed vault there, where in the case of, like, a galactic threat, well, maybe, in the case Galactus decides to wake up, you know, but no, in the case of, like, a world-ending event, like a meteor hits the Earth or something like that, causes a mass tragedy and, like, you know, eradicates a lot of plant life on the planet or whatever, the seed vault contains copies of these seeds, or the genomes or whatever, of these plants, all right? And it's stored under the ground on this frozen archipelago way at the edge of the Earth, in one of the safest locations where it's very cold, so also very dry, and so they can't be damaged, and it's just like they're underground and they're there. So if something happens, I think there was actually an episode of Futurama once where it was referenced, where it was like the planet, like all of the evergreen trees just died on the planet, all the pine trees. So they go to the seed vault and they have, like, pine tree seeds, and that was, like, the premise of the episode. But there's also another vault that's located not far from the seed vault. That's the Arctic World, wait, hold on, AWA, it's like Arctic world archive or something like that, where it stores data from all these different works of fiction and nonfiction and all works that humans have created. So, like, the collective works of William Shakespeare are in, like, the data vault, all that kind of stuff. They take all of that stuff and they store it, and it's surmised that that stuff could, be there and preserved properly for around 1,000 years. Now, 1,000 years on the global scale is nothing like ridiculously long. Like, if you read Dr. Stone, for instance, Dr. Stone was like, I think it was like 3,700 years everyone was in stone. So I'm like, oh man, that sucks. But still, like, having some form of backup is nice to know that it exists. That somewhere in the world there's a mine that was dug out and then it was reinforced, and then in that mine is the collective sum of, like, human literature. I'm like, okay, at least that stuff is there, and in case something does happen, I guess, provided the meteor that hits the Earth actually doesn't hit Svalbard. That would really suck. Like, the one place in the world it hits is the place with all of the backups for everything. So, provided that worst case scenario doesn't happen, or, like, a volcano erupts underneath the damn vault, and, like, it just gets covered in magma. Aside from that happening, this stuff is preserved for future generations, which is great. And that got me thinking about, like, should One Piece be preserved in this vault as well? It might already be. I don't know what, like, a comprehensive list of what's stored in the vault, but it's like, Eiichiro Oda is the 12th best-selling author of all time. Of all time. That includes, like, William Shakespeare is the first, Agatha Christie is second, which I haven't read a lot of Agatha Christie. We've read, like, there was, like, a short story anthology that we read when I was in college, but I don't remember exactly what it was called, but we read a little bit of Agatha Christie. And anyway, then there's a bunch of other authors. Oda is the #1 best-selling Japanese author. Not even just mangaka, author, which means in all of Japan, he is the best-selling author of any kind of book series, in this case, comics or manga, but still. So, 12th best. In all of history, that's pretty impressive. And of course, One Piece has the Guinness Book World Record as well. So it's like, yeah, it's not the longest running manga out there. There are manga that have more chapters than One Piece, but it is the best selling. So I'm thinking, hey, with the way that it is, maybe, some of these manga that have been, like, around for a while, they should be preserved in the vault as well. Maybe they already are, I'm just saying. So, it's just like me thinking about, like, One Piece's place in history. Because it's like, we look at all this stuff, going backwards in time a little bit. Tolkien wrote the Lord of the Rings series and The Hobbit. Didn't he write this back in, like, the 30s? Hey guys, editing Tekking here. Just a quick correction because I hate it when I mess this stuff up. So I was a little confused here. So Tolkien released The Hobbit in 1937, okay? And so he wrote it there in the 30s. However, the larger Lord of the Rings, book series, The Fellowship, Two Towers, and Return of the King, all that stuff was written in the 30s and 40s and then was published in the 50s. So there you go. Just a quick correction there. So technically, he was writing, like, what would become the back lore for the Lord of the Rings in the 1930s. But it was The Hobbit, and then the Lord of the Rings itself came later. So there you go. And so it's like an idea, like, we look in the past now, and it's like, this is an epic, this is a saga, and I don't know how Lord of the Rings was viewed back during the time period it came out. I don't know if it was revealed as, like, as revolutionary as it is now, because obviously with more time that passes, even something that is regarded as, like, oh, this is nothing, this is insignificant during the times, like Vincent van Gogh's paintings, at the time he couldn't really sell shit, but now it's like, really, really important artists throughout history. So I'm not really sure what the viewpoints of this were. I know Shakespeare was popular in his day. I'm not really sure what the perspective of Dante was at the time. Dante put a lot of stuff in here that was like, oh, these popes I don't like and everything there, and, all the Greeks that, because of the Trojan War, Dante was Italian, so he was on the Roman side, so he put a lot of Greek heroes and stuff in, like, lower pits of hell and all that shit. So I'm not sure how the world viewed it at the time. And also, hey, that's another thing too, because a lot of these works of literature will be adapting stuff, like, during the time period that was happening. So, like, in the Divine Comedy, for example, Dante's walking through hell, he encounters a pope in hell or whatever, and at the time, everybody would have known who that pope was, and just like, oh, that pope is in hell because of this, or whatever. In the Eighth Circle, for, like, not treachery, the Eighth Circle was, fraud. So he was like, whatever. So at the time period, everybody would have known that, but it's like, now if you read the Divine Comedy, it's like, oh, okay, who's this random dude, this pope that I've never heard of that's in the 8th level of hell? It's like, whatever. It's like, okay, something that was relevant at that time period, moving on. Now, obviously, One Piece is different because it's a work of fiction. I mean, the Divine Comedy is a work of fiction too, but like Dante includes like real world people in the book, in the epic poem. And One Piece obviously doesn't have that, but still, I can't help but think the way it'll be viewed 100 years from now will be different than the way it's viewed now, hopefully for the better, or maybe not necessarily better or worse, just from a different perspective, right? Also, you gotta understand One Piece is a different kind of medium, you know, these are books. I think it took Dante about 20 years to finish the Divine Comedy. It took, you know, there's still a lot of Shakespeare plays that have never been finished. You know, I don't know exactly how long it took Tolkien to write Lord of the Rings, but I would have said plus The Hobbit, plus the Silmarillion, plus all that extra bonus stuff he did. So it took a while for him to get that done. So different formats because these are books or plays, but then you have One Piece, which is a manga. So it's like a weekly series, and it's a primarily visual series, not a text-based series. So it's a different kind of medium a little bit from this stuff, right? And it's like, okay, well, that would be really cool if like 200 years from now, you know, kids are learning about literature, and it's like, okay, well, this is William Shakespeare, and he wrote stuff, you know, in the Middle Ages and all that stuff, and then, you know, here's Tolkien at the 20th century, he was writing stuff, and then here's One Piece, which was this epic pirate adventure about romance and adventure and all that stuff that took place right around the turn of the 21st century, and it was super popular at the time. That would be so weird. I would love to have a time machine just for that alone. Like, having the time machine, I would love to go back and visit all different ages from antiquity, but it would also be pretty damn sweet to take a time machine 200 years into the future and like see what people are learning at that point. And it's like, oh yes, One Piece was one of the great epic adventures of, you know, of the past, and it's like they learn about that stuff, and it's just like, that's crazy, right? So yeah, I mean, like, once again, if you're not a huge fan of One Piece, it's just gonna be like, yeah, whatever, you know, it's like there's other manga that deserve better or deserve the placement or whatever. I would think of a few. Like, obviously I'm gonna be biased, so if I could choose what gets put in like the Arctic World Archive vault or whatever, I would pick One Piece, I would pick Full Metal Alchemist, I'd put Dr. Stone in there, right? Like, there's a lot of books that I personally read, but you kind of have to, once again, put bias aside a lot of times. Like, okay, does this really deserve a place in like human history as a whole? Like, one book that I read a few years ago was The Disaster Artist, the story of the making of The Room with, you know, Tommy Wiseau and everything. I love that book. I thought it was a great book. It was hilarious, but I don't know if this deserves to be placed in the vault. I don't know if like aliens from 1,000 years from now really need to know about Tommy Wiseau. Well, maybe they do. I don't know, but it's like, you know, it's like, okay, I really love that book, but does it deserve a place in human history for what it was? And with One Piece, once again, I'm pretty biased, but with One Piece, I feel like it does. I feel like it genuinely deserves that. You know, if anything else, like, if you're gonna, like, represent manga on, like, that world heritage level of, like, okay, this is stored information of, like, this is what these plays were like. This is what nonfiction was. This is an example of fiction and mystery and all these different genres. Once you get to manga, manga should be preserved as a medium. Same thing with comic books, Western comic books as well. Same deal. You know, there should be archives of like DC comics like Superman and Batman, and Marvel comics like Spider-Man. I think they should be preserved just the same because that's part of, you know, literature. That's still literature. And then when you get to manga, it's like, okay, this Japanese style of comics, you know, what should be represented of that? And I'm not saying it should be just One Piece. Dragon Ball would have a place there as well, and some other really famous manga throughout history. But you should include that stuff in there as well, and I think One Piece definitely meets that criteria of being included, right? And on top of that, there's a bunch of other series I love, like Bleach and Naruto, My Hero Academia, Black Butler, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I guess the question I'll ask you here at the end is, if you could choose to preserve 5 manga series inside of the Arctic World Archive, in the vault, in the Svalbard, in the far-off northern corner of the planet, if you could preserve 5 manga series in their entirety, even if they haven't finished yet, so One Piece, you know, obviously if it finishes, you know, added in, which 5 would you pick? And in addition to that, if you'd also like to tell me maybe 5 works of literature just in general, like, some of your favorite books or your favorite plays or whatever you've read, it could be any work of literature and in period. I believe that archive might also deal with like movies and video games as well. Maybe, well, video games deserve a place too, like they do, just because they're more recent, just because, like, okay, well, the Assassin's Creed's, well, Mario deserves a place in the archive. He's Mario, for God's sake, okay? So even if it's like, all right, Mario being placed in the archive, just because Mario came out a few decades ago compared to like Shakespeare's Macbeth, a few hundreds years ago, still deserves a place. But I think the archive, I think it's mainly books, but there might be other stuff. So which 5 manga would you preserve, and which 5 pieces of literature would you preserve in the archive, okay, for future generations of humans? Or if, something happens and there is a world, catastrophe that wipes out humanity, aliens come to the planet like 1,000 years from now, and like there's no humans on the planet anymore, we've all been turned to stone or some shit, and it's like they find the vault and they're like, this was the collective power of humanity during that time period. And then the first cartridge, they just take one at random, and they just stick it in, and it's like, oh, One Piece. Okay, that's the first introduction that humanity has to aliens. So I'm like, okay, all right, let's see where this goes. I'm interested in this Luffy guy. I want to see where this goes. All right, oh, Zoro's pretty cool. Oh, look at Frankie. He's like a cyborg. That's neat, right? And then those aliens go back to their planet, and they structure an entire world based around One Piece, making it a reality coming full circle. Best case scenario, that's how it's gonna go. But anyway, yeah, this was a weird one. This is a little bit more of a scattered kind of video, so I apologize for that. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about One Piece and its place in like human history, and in the future, how it's going to be viewed as a work of fiction. And it's like, it's not finished yet, so I can't really like go on like oh, this is going to be regarded as like one of the greatest finales of all time, because we just haven't gotten there yet, although I hope it is. And like I said, I hope when we get to that point, it's going to be a big tall order for Oda. But if Oda could write something so damn emotional where I'm reading it or I'm watching the anime version and I actually laugh and cry, I'd be like, that was a great series. That was 25 years to reach this point, and I loved every single minute of it. You know what I mean? Like that. And, I shit on the 4Kids dub, because there's a lot of stuff that you could shit on with the 4Kids dub, but it's like, the 4Kids dub at least introduced me to One Piece, you understand? Like, if it wasn't for the 4Kids dub, I probably wouldn't have found out about One Piece until way later. Still would have found out about it, but I first was, One Piece first, came to my attention when I was 12. And so I kind of watched it then, and I understood the basic concept. And even with 4Kids, the concept was still there. Like, they're going on a grand adventure looking for a great treasure. It was just changed a little bit and kind of dumbed down for a more childish audience. And then later on, when I was like 16, 17, is when I started reading the manga weekly, and it's like, okay, this has a much more serious tone now. I've been on the track from there. So it's like from when I was 12 to now when I'm going to be, 28 next week. Next Saturday, I'm going to be 28. So yeah, this is a good 16 years of my life now that I've been invested in this story in one form or another. And when we finally reach the conclusion, when I'll probably be in my early 30s, I just can't wait for that moment. But I also wanted to wait because I'm enjoying the ride, and that's how it's a great story. Anyway, thanks for watching this video, whatever this was. Barry, go fly, Barry. Fly off into the sunset, Barry.